It's now time for some ADND. This is the Attention Deficit News Disorder segment on Common Sense for Uncommon Times. It's intended to bring focus to important domestic and international events we might not know a whole lot about or could be distracted from hearing. America is facing a potential crisis that could put us in a more vulnerable situation than we've seen in the last 60 to 80 years. Current policies, including those advanced by the Green New Deal advocates, could shut down our entire economy soon. I'm not talking about Governor Newsom's plan to outlaw the sale of gas-powered new cars in California, although that is related to the bigger problem. What I am referring to is a real threat that's of our own making, or rather some people we know, and it could happen before Christmas this year in 2022. Now, I hope and pray that common sense will prevail and a remedy can be found in time. And hopefully you're aware, but I'm surprised at how few know this, that the United States currently only has a diesel fuel supply to last us less than 25 days. I mean, think about this. What kind of fuel do semi-trucks, buses, trains, farm machinery, military vehicles, and some ships use? How are groceries, goods, and services all transported from manufacturers to local stores and distribution centers? What do they use to deliver gasoline to your gas station? And have you ever thought about what is a major source of heating in the Northeast and Upper Midwest? On average, diesel fuel in America costs well above $5 a gallon in America today. This has caused some shortages of things that you'd normally buy in the grocery store, and all of us have noticed how the price of routine shopping trips have skyrocketed. For context, it's helpful to know some history about America's strategic petroleum reserve. Following the fuel and energy shortages back in the 1970s, America established the reserve with the purpose of making sure future unanticipated emergency disruptions in the gas supply wouldn't cripple our economy and place us in a poor defensive posture. I know the strategic reserves don't hold diesel fuel, nor are they intended to. It consists primarily of unrefined crude oil, although through the refinement process, crude oil can produce gasoline, diesel, and other petroleum-based products. Our present crisis isn't the result of an unanticipated disruption or something like a natural disaster, unless you consider the current presidential administration that. It is directly linked to Biden's ambition to end our dependence on fossil fuels, regardless of the impact it has on our infrastructure, the citizens, and military preparedness. Forcing green policies when there is no substitute energy infrastructure to fill the void has led us to this predicament. High cost on durable and non-durable goods and services are only one part of this. Economics 101 teaches that when demand exceeds supply, prices are going to go up. Manufacturers and truck drivers cannot eat the cost of increased diesel fuel and reduced supply. And if their fuel supply disappears, our entire economy collapses. Furthermore, if our military can't mobilize, it makes it impossible for them to do their job, that of defending the United States of America. Today, as in the past, America consumes a combination of domestic and foreign oil. After 9/11, President Bush helped our reserves exceed our planned capacity when we hit a record 726 million barrels just after he left office. In the decade following him, the reserves dipped a little bit, but climbed back up to around 650 million barrels shortly after President Trump's term in office concluded. Now, during Trump's term, in 2019, domestic oil production allowed America to finally begin exporting more oil than we were importing. Now, some people call that energy independence because if our international suppliers dried up, then there's enough being produced here to keep us going. Almost 23 months into Biden's first term as president, and we've gone from 650 million barrels to about 400 million barrels of oil in our reserves. I want to set aside the topic of the reserves for just a moment and ask, why is there such a gross shortage of diesel fuel in our regular free market supply? Well, the free markets of oil are heavily regulated and controlled. Biden and fellow bureaucrats have tied the hands of domestic fossil fuel companies, while international competitors have continued to grow without the restrictions the U.S. government places on us. Next, we don't have the 830 to 880,000 barrels of oil flowing through the Keystone Pipeline every day. If that oil had been coming from Alberta as planned, it would have contributed significantly to the diesel fuel production. Then you consider that there are 5 major oil refineries in the last couple of years that have permanently been shuttered, and 5 others have been forced to switch to alternative fuels. Collectively, they produced 750,000 barrels of diesel every day. These factors and other bad policies have greatly limited production of gas and oil, which has raised costs not only on fuel for cars and trucks, but everything we consume. President Biden should own this catastrophe. When he saw the trajectory of gas heading to $5 a gallon, then he began releasing more oil from the reserves, which has resulted in depleting our reserves by 200 million barrels this year alone. Remember, this wasn't an emergency disruption in the oil supply. This is so important that it really needs to be repeated. The reserves were not created to offset a political crisis caused by bad policy from the White House, but that's how he's used it. With the president's poll numbers in the toilet, inflation on the rise, and the midterm elections only 6 months away, Biden and everyone recognized how this would likely impact the balance of power that the Democrats had firmly held. So he drained the reserves to almost half of its capacity in hopes of buying voter loyalty. Next, the oil released from the reserves were used primarily to produce gasoline for cars for various reasons. But I'm going to emphasize it was primarily to lower gas prices to divert attention away from the disaster he created. Now, to further divert attention, President Biden has continued rewriting history. The other day, he said that he inherited an economy where gas was an average of $5 a gallon.
In tonight's Fact or Fiction, we're looking into a claim made by President Biden yesterday. During a speech in Syracuse, New York, the president made the following claim about the current state of gas prices in our country.
Today, the most common price of gas in America is $3.39, down from over $5 when I took office.
But those numbers are fiction. When the president made his speech yesterday, the average price for gas in the country was $3.76, not $3.39. And as for the price when he took office, for the week ending January 25th, 2021, gas averaged $2.39 a gallon, not more than $5.
This was completely false, and I can't emphasize to you enough how blatantly false that statement was. Here are the facts. On January the 20th of 2021, Biden and the Democrats took control. We had nearly 650 million barrels in the reserves, and gas was at a national average of $2.39 a gallon. It wasn't $5 like Biden claimed, but $2.39. Earlier this year, on March 30th, when gas hit $4.25 a gallon, Biden announced he would release oil from the reserves to lower the cost of gas. Well, it takes a little time for increased production to influence supply and cost, so the price of gas continued to climb until it reached $5 a gallon in June of this year, 18 months into his presidency. At this point, people were paying almost as much to fuel their lawnmowers as they were their cars back under Trump. 2.5 months after Biden's announcement, gasoline production from the oil released from the reserves began to affect prices, and they started coming down. Today, with only a few days remaining before the midterm elections, the prices have dropped to $3.74 a gallon. Still, we're paying 56.5% more for gas today than what we were on Biden's inauguration day. So, why did Biden claim he inherited an economy from Trump where gas was on average $5 a gallon? I can think of two pretty good reasons for this. The first one is he's lying. And he believes enough people will take him at his word without doing their homework and will continue to vote for him, or rather Democrats, in the midterms. The second reason could be that he actually believes the words escaping his mouth, which means that he's unsuitable for governing. Now, I'm reluctant to question him on his mental faculties because if the 25th Amendment is invoked, we're going to get Kamala Harris in the White House, and I don't think that's going to put us in a better situation. Regardless of which scenario is accurate, we know that Biden has routinely offered versions of history that are completely contrary to reality. In another recent historical revision, he said that he managed to get the student loan debt forgiveness plan passed by just a few votes.
You probably are aware I've just signed a law that's being challenged by my Republican colleagues, the same people who got PPP loans for up to close to, in some cases, up to $500,000-$600,000. They have no problem with that. The individuals in Congress got those. But what we've provided for is if you went to school, if you qualify for a Pell Grant, you qualify for you qualify for $20,000 in debt forgiveness. Secondly, if you don't have one of those loans, you just get $10,000 written off. It's passed. I got it passed by a vote or two, and it's in effect.
No, he didn't. And this is another thing you can't gloss over. He issued an executive order, which is completely unconstitutional, and I truly believe that we'll find this out soon enough from the courts, but unfortunately that'll probably happen after the elections. Finally, on November the 1st, he once again claimed that his son Beau Biden died in Iraq.
Inflation is a worldwide problem right now because of a war in Iraq and the impact on oil and what Russia's doing. The war in Ukraine. And thinking of Iraq because that's where my son died.
He later corrected himself, but he has made this claim on multiple occasions. If you don't know the story, in 2009, Beau Biden returned from a year-long deployment in Iraq. Almost 6 years later, in 2015, he tragically died of a battle with brain cancer in Bethesda, Maryland. That's a long ways away from Iraq and many years after his time there. If President Biden is lying, then not only is his press corps covering for him, but there's a lack of accountability from the free press, the public, and Congress. If he's unsuitable for governing, then he has enablers who are guilty of elder abuse who are more interested in advancing a power-controlling agenda than they are the goodwill of our nation and the proper care of somebody who should probably be under appropriate medical supervision and away from public scrutiny. So, is he mentally incapacitated or a liar? I can hardly believe that my hope is he's just bold-faced lying to us. Well, we'll be back in just a few minutes for the next part of this episode to look further into how we got to this point in time and who, in addition to Biden, is responsible and what we can do to help correct it.